I never thought my own daughter would be the one to bury me alive. Not in the dirt, but in prison bars. And I never thought I'd spend 20 years watching the seasons change through a narrow window because the child I carried, the child I raised with trembling hands and tearful prayers, decided I was worth less than a handful of her dreams. But the day I faced her again. Oh, that day, I didn't come as the broken mother she left behind. Came with files. Files she never saw coming. Files that would turn the entire game upside down. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 84 years old, a retired nurse from a quiet town outside Boston. People call me Maggie, but once upon a time I was just Mom. I used to bake cookies every Sunday, tend to the roses in my front yard, and dream about peaceful golden years. I imagined rocking chairs, soft blankets, and my grandchildren's laughter echoing in my home. But life doesn't hand out peace to everyone, especially not to mothers who put too much faith in their children. Let me take you back to the moment that ripped my world apart. It was a cold morning, the kind that turns your breath into smoke. I was in court, standing there in a faded sweater, my hands trembling as the cuffs dug into my wrists. I kept whispering, "This is a mistake. Please, this is a mistake." The judge's gavel came down like thunder. 20 years. 20 years for fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Crimes I never committed. Crimes someone planted right at my feet. And that someone was my daughter, Emily. Yes, Emily. My own flesh and blood. The little blonde girl who used to chase fireflies in our backyard. Who once clung to my skirts and begged me never to leave her side. The same girl who kissed my cheek at high school graduation and promised, "Mom, I'll make you proud someday." But in that courtroom, she didn't even look at me. She sat with her new business partners, her lips painted red, her hair curled like a movie star's, and her eyes, cold, detached, as if I were nothing more than a stranger blocking her path to success. I remember trying to catch her gaze, silently pleading, "Emily, why?" But she turned her face away. I felt my knees buckle, the room spinning. 20 years. A sentence so heavy that it nearly crushed the air from my lungs. And as the guards dragged me away, I realized something deeper than shock. My daughter had buried me. She wanted my $10 million shares in a pharmaceutical company. Shares my late husband left me when he died. Shares that grew in value while I lived modestly. Saving every penny, never spoiling myself. Emily begged me to sell them so she could start her own tech empire. I refused. Not because I didn't want to help, but because I knew her. Impulsive, reckless, always chasing shortcuts instead of hard work. That refusal sealed my fate. She framed me with such precision that even the best lawyers couldn't untangle the web. But prison doesn't just lock up your body. It locks your heart. For years, I lay awake on a steel bed, replaying every memory of Emily. Her first steps. Her first broken tooth. The way she cried when her pet hamster died. How did we get here? I'd whisper into the darkness. How did my baby girl become my executioner? I wanted to hate her. But every time I tried, my chest burned with grief instead. 'Cause hate is easy. Grief is heavier. In that cell I grew old. My hair turned white. My bones ached. My hands, once steady enough to hold newborns in the hospital, shook so badly I could barely write letters. And worst of all, I never got a single visit from her. Not one. Until the day everything changed. It was my 17th year behind bars. I had learned to stop counting days, but that one is burned into my soul. I was folding laundry in the prison workshop when the guard called my name. "Hayes, visitor." My heart skipped. For a second I dared to believe it was Emily. Maybe she had come with tears in her eyes, ready to admit what she'd done. Maybe she wanted to bring me home before death claimed me. But when I walked into that visiting room, it wasn't Emily. It was Michael Carter. I nearly collapsed. Michael, my childhood neighbor, the boy who used to toss stones at my window, the man who studied law while I became a nurse. We lost touch after college, but there he was, sitting at that metal table, older, grayer, but with the same steady eyes I remembered. "Maggie," he whispered when I sat down, his voice breaking. "I heard what happened. I should have come sooner. I'm so sorry." For the first time in years, I felt tears sting my eyes. Michael, I choked, gripping his hands. Everyone believed her. They believed Emily. But you believe me, don't you? He didn't hesitate. Of course I do. That was the moment hope crept back into my chest. Michael was a lawyer, an old friend who knew me before lies and betrayal twisted my name. And he was the first person willing to dig where no one else dared. For the next 3 years, he worked tirelessly, combing through records, tracing hidden bank accounts, interviewing witnesses. And piece by piece, he unearthed the truth. Emily had orchestrated everything. She funneled money into shell companies, signed documents in my name, and fabricated evidence. She had the help of her husband and a corrupt accountant. By the 20th year, Michael stood before a judge with files thick enough to crush the lies. My conviction was overturned. I walked out of prison a free woman. But I wasn't the same Maggie who went in. I was hardened, scarred, but burning with quiet fire. And that brings us to the day I faced her again. She had become powerful, CEO of a billion-dollar tech company. Her face on magazine covers, her speeches broadcasted across America. Everyone saw her as a visionary. But I knew the truth. I showed up at her company headquarters with Michael by my side. My heart thundered as we walked through those glass doors. Employees gawked at me. An old woman with white hair, carrying a folder so thick it could drown empires. The receptionist asked, "Do you have an appointment?" I smiled faintly. "Tell Emily her mother's here." When Emily walked into that boardroom and saw me standing there alive, free, and holding those files, the color drained from her face. And as I laid the documents on the polished table, my voice steady, I whispered, "You buried me for 20 years, Emily. But today I dig up the grave you built. Let's see how deep it swallows you." Her hands trembled. The boardroom fell silent. And that was the moment the game truly began. They say the cruelest betrayals are the ones wrapped in love. Believe that now. Because before my daughter framed me, before she built her empire with blood on her hands, she was my little girl, the light of my life. I can still see her, Emily Grace Hayes, on the day she was born. A storm raged outside the hospital window, rain lashing against the glass, thunder shaking the floor. But in my arms I held a miracle. A baby with a tuft of golden hair. Her eyes blue like a clear sky after rain. "She's perfect," my husband whispered, pressing his lips to my forehead. "She's our beginning." And she was. Emily was our world. We weren't rich then. My husband, Charles, was a pharmacist, and I was a nurse working double shifts. We scraped by, clipping coupons, patching clothes, stretching every dollar. But Emily never knew lack. If she wanted a dollhouse, Charles built one from wood in the garage. If she wanted cookies, I baked until midnight, even when my feet ached. She grew up knowing laughter, not hunger. Warmth, not worry. I made sure of it. I remember her 5th birthday. We couldn't afford a pony ride like the other kids in town had, but Charles rented a small bouncy castle. Emily screamed with joy, her hair flying as she bounced higher and higher. At the end of the day, she hugged me tight and whispered, "You're the best mom in the whole wide world." I believed her. Years passed. She was smart, so smart. In school, teachers said she had a gift for leadership. At home, she was bossy, demanding, sometimes manipulative even with her friends. But I told myself it was ambition, that she was destined for greatness. When Charles died suddenly of a heart attack, Emily was only 16. I thought the grief would crush us both. I worked double shifts to cover bills, but I also held her at night when she cried, telling her, "We'll make it, baby. We'll survive together." I didn't realize then that survival meant something different to her. When Charles passed, he left me his shares in a small pharmaceutical company he had invested in years earlier. At the time, they weren't worth much. But I kept them. Something told me they would grow. And they did, beyond anything I could imagine. By the time Emily was in her 30s, those shares were worth nearly $10 million. That money wasn't for me. It was security. It was protection for rainy days, for hospitals, for emergencies. It was my legacy, the one thing I could leave behind for Emily after giving her everything else. But Emily didn't want to wait. First it was subtle. "Mom, you should sell those shares. The market is high." Or, "You're old now, you don't need all that." I laughed it off, telling her, "Emily, I'm not selling. This is our safety net." But her voice grew sharper. One evening over dinner, she slammed her fork down. "It's selfish, Mom. I have ideas, visions. I could start my own company and build something incredible. But you're hoarding wealth you don't even use." I stared at her, my hands trembling. "This money isn't for me to splurge. It's for you later. It's for your children, for your future." She glared. "Then why not give it to me now? Why make me wait?" It was the first time I saw something dangerous in her eyes. Not hunger for success, but entitlement. Still, I tried to reason with her. I told her about responsibility, about earning her way, about patience. She stormed out that night, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I sat there alone, staring at the table, wondering if I had made a mistake raising her to believe she could have anything she wanted. But I didn't know just how far she would go. The first real crack appeared when she brought home a man named David. He was slick, sharp-dressed, always with a smile that never reached his eyes. I didn't trust him. But Emily was smitten. "David believes in me," she gushed. "He says I can be the next big tech visionary." I forced a smile, but my stomach churned. I saw the way David looked at me, calculating, measuring. He knew about the shares. He knew about the money. One night, after Emily went upstairs, he lingered in the kitchen with me. "You know, Mrs. Hayes," he said smoothly, $10 million could change the world. Your daughter could be a force. Don't you want that for her?" I narrowed my eyes. "I want her to learn that real success isn't handed to you. It's earned." He chuckled, his voice low. "With respect, ma'am, you're old-fashioned. This is the age of speed. People don't wait decades anymore." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. From then on, things escalated. Emily stopped visiting me as often. She became secretive, guarded. I found out she and David had started a company, scraping money from investors, but it was never enough. They needed my shares. And when I refused, their smiles faded. That was when the betrayal began to take shape. I remember the night clearly. Emily came over, her face tight, her eyes red as if she had been crying. She clutched my hands and whispered, "Mom, please. I'm drowning. Just sell the shares. Help me this once." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and my heart ached. I almost gave in. Almost. But something deep inside whispered, "Don't." I pulled my hands away gently. "No, Emily. Not like this. You have to build your life without shortcuts. I won't hand you the easy way out." Her tears dried instantly. Her eyes hardened. And she left without saying another word. That was the last time I saw her before the police came knocking. They stormed my house at dawn, shoving papers in my face. Fraud. Embezzlement. Money laundering. My world flipped upside down in a single morning. I kept shouting, "This is a mistake." But the evidence was ironclad, emails, transfers, signatures, all pointing to me. I didn't understand. Not until the trial, when Emily sat in the witness stand and testified against me. She told the court I had stolen from investors, that I had manipulated her father's company to funnel money, that I was greedy, controlling, and dangerous. Her words cut deeper than knives. I wanted to stand up and scream, "I raised you. I gave you everything. How can you do this to me?" But my throat closed. And when the gavel fell, when I was sentenced to 20 years, Emily smiled. Faint, victorious smile. That smile haunted me for years in prison. And yet, even in my grief I wondered, was it all Emily? Or was David pulling the strings? Was my daughter a monster in her own right, or had she been molded by his greed? That question gnawed at me every night. But I didn't have the answer. Not yet. Because the truth, the full truth, was darker than even I imagined. And the day Michael uncovered it was the day my hope turned into fire. Prison isn't just bars and concrete. It's silence that eats at your bones. It's loneliness that claws at your heart in the dead of night. When the gates clanged shut behind me, I thought, this can't be real. I had lived 84 years as a nurse, a wife, a mother. I had held dying men's hands, delivered babies, and saved lives. And yet there I was. Number 47,192, stripped of everything, shoved into a cell that smelled of sweat and despair. The first night, I cried until my throat went raw. I clutched the thin blanket like it was a lifeline, whispering Emily's name over and over. She'll come. She'll realize what she's done. She'll visit me. She'll say sorry. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Months into years. And Emily never came. I aged faster in prison than I ever did outside. My blonde hair, once golden, turned white like snow. My hands grew knotted, my joints stiff. I had once been proud of my sharp mind, but years of routine dulled everything. Wake up. Roll call. Meals of tasteless mush. Work in the laundry. Back to the cell. Lights out. In that endless cycle, time blurred. Birthdays passed without cake. Holidays without family. Seasons without celebration. And yet, life outside was not standing still. Emily was rising. I would hear about her in whispers from the guards, from newspapers passed around the cells. Emily Hayes, the youngest female tech CEO in America. Emily Hayes announces billion-dollar expansion. Emily Hayes on the cover of Forbes. Each headline was like a dagger twisting in my chest. She was becoming everything she ever wanted, building an empire on the ashes of my life. And I was powerless to stop her. But even worse than the betrayal was the loneliness. Prison has a way of making you invisible. People forget you exist. My neighbors stopped writing. Old friends vanished. Even the church that once welcomed me shut its doors, ashamed to be associated with a criminal. I would sit on my bunk at night, staring at the cracked ceiling, asking myself the same question again and again. What did I do wrong? Did I spoil her? Did I raise her too soft? Did I love her too much? The guilt ate at me more than the cold food or the aching bones. Because what mother wants to admit that her greatest failure is her own child? There were times, many times, when I thought I would die in that cell. And sometimes I almost wanted to. But then something happened. It was my 17th year inside. By then I had stopped expecting miracles. I was folding laundry in the prison workshop when a guard called my name. Hayes, you've got a visitor. My heart stumbled. For a moment, I dared to believe it was Emily. I imagined her standing on the other side of the glass, her eyes finally filled with regret, her voice trembling as she said, "Mom, I'm sorry. Please forgive me." But when I stepped into that visiting room, my breath caught. It wasn't Emily. It was Michael Carter. Michael, my childhood neighbor. The boy who used to sneak me candy when we were 10. The man who studied law while I went into nursing. We had lost touch after marriage, and work carried us in different directions. And yet, there he was, older, grayer, but with those same steady eyes. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice breaking. I almost collapsed into the chair. "Michael. My God. Is it really you?" He reached across the table and took my shaking hands. His grip was warm, solid, real. "I heard about what happened. I should have come sooner. I'm so sorry." Tears I thought I had buried forever spilled down my face. "Michael, everyone believed her. They all believed Emily. Do you believe me?" He didn't hesitate. "Of course I do. I've known you my whole life. You're no criminal. You're a mother who was betrayed. And I'm going to help you." Those words, "I'm going to help you," ignited something I thought was long dead. Oh, Michael was a lawyer, a good one. And while the world had forgotten me, he hadn't. He still saw Maggie Hayes, the nurse, the mother, the neighbor. Not a criminal. He came back again and again. Each visit, he brought stacks of papers, his glasses perched low on his nose, his pen scratching across notes. "I've been combing through your case," he told me. Something doesn't add up. The money trail, it doesn't make sense. I listened, my heart thudding. For years, I had been told there was no way out, that the evidence was too strong. But Michael wasn't convinced. There are accounts in the Cayman Islands, signatures that don't match, documents that were backdated. Maggie, someone went to great lengths to bury you. We both knew who that someone was. But Emily wasn't the only hand in it. Michael uncovered traces of David, Emily's husband. He found emails, encrypted transactions, offshore companies tied back to David's name. Your daughter may have testified, Michael said quietly. But David, he's the architect. And I think she let him pull the strings. My heart twisted. Did that mean Emily was innocent? Or at least less guilty? But then I remembered the way she smiled at my sentencing. The way her eyes shone, not with fear, but with triumph.
Well,
She wasn't innocent. She was complicit. For 3 years, Michael dug deeper, working tirelessly, even when I told him to stop to live his life. I can't stop, Maggie, he said once, his eyes burning. You don't deserve to die in here. And then, in my 20th year behind bars, Michael walked into that visiting room carrying a folder so thick it looked like it could topple mountains. He laid it on the table and whispered, "We have her. We have all of them." Inside that folder was my freedom. Evidence that Emily and David had orchestrated everything. Fabricated emails, forged signatures, stolen funds. Every string tied back to them. My hands shook as I touched the papers. For the first time in 2 decades, I saw light at the end of the tunnel. And when the judge overturned my conviction, when the gates opened and I walked into the sun as a free woman, I felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Power. But freedom wasn't enough. 'Cause Emily was still out there, smiling for cameras, sitting in her corner office, living as though I had never existed. And I wasn't done. No, I was just beginning. That's why, weeks later, I found myself standing in front of her headquarters, Michael at my side, the folder clutched in my hands. We walked through the glass doors. The receptionist froze as I whispered, "Tell Emily her mother is here." And when Emily entered that boardroom and saw me, alive, free, holding the very files that could destroy her, her face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no words came. And as I laid the folder on the table, I leaned forward and whispered, "You buried me once, Emily. Let's see if you're ready for the grave you dug." The silence was deafening. Her hands trembled. Her board members stared. And then, she opened her mouth to speak. The boardroom was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock on the far wall. The polished table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and the floor-to-ceiling windows showed the Boston skyline glittering in the distance. But no one in that room was looking at the city. They were looking at me, an 84-year-old woman with white hair and trembling hands, standing tall after 20 years in prison. And they were looking at the thick folder I had just placed on the table, the folder that could shatter everything they believed about their CEO, Emily Hayes. Emily's lips parted, but no words came at first. She just stared at me, her face drained of color, her manicured fingers tightening around the chair in front of her. Finally, she found her voice. "Mom!" Her tone cracked, uncertain, a slip of the little girl she used to be. But then, like a mask sliding back into place, her expression hardened. She straightened her shoulders and said sharply, "What are you doing here?" I held her gaze, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "I came to give you back something, Emily. The truth." A murmur rippled across the room. Her board members exchanged glances. Michael, standing beside me, opened the folder. He pulled out the first document and slid it across the table. "This," he said calmly, "is a copy of the forged email chain you submitted to the court 20 years ago. The metadata proves it was created after the supposed dates. In other words, it's fake." One of the board members, a man in a navy suit, leaned forward, squinting. "What's going on here, Emily?" Emily's jaw tightened. She let out a laugh, high-pitched and brittle. "This is absurd. She's my mother. She's been confused, manipulated. Look at her, she's senile. Her words stung, but I refused to flinch. I may be old, Emily, but my memory is sharper than you think. I remember the night you begged me for those shares. I remember the look in your eyes when I refused. And I remember the smile on your face when the judge sentenced me. The room grew colder. Michael slid another document forward. This, he said, is the Cayman Islands account your husband, David, used to funnel the stolen money. The trail leads directly back to both of you. Emily's eyes flickered, just for a second. But she quickly composed herself, snapping, "You're making baseless accusations. My husband handled our finances. I had nothing to do with that." Michael arched a brow. "Funny. Because here." He pulled another page from the folder, laying it flat for all to see. "Is a transfer you personally authorized. With your signature." Gasps filled the boardroom. Emily's face flushed red. "That's a lie. It's fabricated." Her board members whispered among themselves, their voices sharp with suspicion. I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. "You buried me for 20 years, Emily. You let me rot in a cell so you could wear your designer suits and give speeches about innovation. But I'm here now. And I'm not alone." Michael pulled out yet another document, this one thicker, bound. "And this," he said, slapping it down on the table, "is the sworn testimony of the accountant you bribed to forge the books. He's ready to testify. In court." Emily's breath hitched. For the first time, real fear flashed in her eyes. One of the board members, a woman in a gray blazer, crossed her arms. "Emily, is this true? Because if it is, everything you've built is a lie." Emily's hand shook. She reached for the water glass in front of her, her fingers trembling so badly that water sloshed onto the table. I stared at her, my heart heavy. A part of me still longed for her to break down, to weep, to say, "Mom, I'm sorry." But she didn't. Instead, she straightened again, her mask of steel snapping back into place. "You think you can just walk in here and ruin me?" she hissed, her voice venomous now. "After everything I've built. After everything I've sacrificed. You're not destroying me. Not again." Michael frowned. "Emily, the evidence speaks for itself. You're going to face charges. Your empire will crumble. It's over." But Emily smirked. And in that smirk, I saw something chilling. She wasn't finished. Slowly, she reached into her leather briefcase, pulled out a thin folder of her own, and tossed it onto the table. "You're not the only one with files," she said coldly. "You think I didn't prepare for this day? You think I didn't know you'd come crawling back, looking for revenge?" My heart skipped. Michael's jaw clenched. "What is this?" Emily leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs with a defiant tilt of her chin. "Leverage. Enough to make sure that if I go down, you go down with me." She looked directly at me, her eyes burning. "Mother or not, I'll ruin you all over again." The boardroom erupted in chaos. The air in the boardroom thickened as Emily's folder sat on the table like a loaded gun. The board members leaned in, whispering, their eyes darting between her and me. Michael's jaw tightened, his hand hovering protectively near the evidence we had brought. Emily tapped her manicured nail against the folder, the sharp click echoing like a countdown. Finally, she slid it across the table. "Go on," she said coolly. "Open it. Let everyone see." Michael hesitated, then flipped it open. His eyes flickered as he scanned the pages, his face tightening with every line. He looked at me, then back at the folder. "What is it?" asked, my heart pounding. Emily smirked. "Insurance." Michael exhaled sharply. "She's claiming you laundered money from inside prison, that even after your conviction you were involved in new schemes." Gasps broke out around the table. One man muttered, "My God," another whispered, "Is this true?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's impossible," I snapped, my voice trembling. "I was behind bars for 20 years. I didn't even have access to a bank account, let alone the internet." Emily's smirk widened. "Oh, but there are records, Mother. Transfers. Signatures. Statements from inmates who say you orchestrated operations through them. The board members' murmurs grew louder. Some looked at me with suspicion now, as if the stench of guilt clung to me again. I gripped the edge of the table, fury rising. You forged this. Just like before. Emily leaned forward, her eyes cold. Maybe. Maybe not. But perception is power. Do you think these people care about the truth? Or about the story that headlines will tell if I release this? Disgraced ex-con mother tries to destroy daughter out of jealousy. Caught laundering money from prison. She laughed bitterly. You'd be buried again before you could blink. The boardroom fell into tense silence. Every eye turned to me. I could feel judgment, doubt, whispers pressing against my skin. For a moment I faltered. My knees shook, my throat closed. It felt like 20 years ago all over again, the gavel slamming down, the cold chains tightening. My own daughter, twisting knives into me with practiced precision. But then Michael's hand touched mine under the table. Steady, grounding. He leaned in, whispering so only I could hear. Don't break. That's what she wants. We'll expose this too. Trust me. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. I survived prison. I survived 20 years of loneliness. Can survive this. When I opened my eyes, I met Emily's stare with steel of my own. You may control the narrative for now, Emily. But lies don't stay buried forever. You should know that better than anyone. Her smirk faltered for the briefest second. Michael straightened, addressing the board. What you're looking at is another fabrication, just like the ones that put Margaret behind bars 2 decades ago. And we can prove it. Every alleged signature in this file was traced with the same software we used to expose the earlier forgeries. This isn't evidence. It's desperation. A woman at the table, sharp-eyed and skeptical, leaned in. Emily, is this true? Did you fabricate this file? Emily's lips tightened. Of course not. But her voice wavered ever so slightly. I seized the moment. She's afraid. That's why she's grasping at straws. 'Cause she knows the truth is out there. And when it comes crashing down, all of you will see who she really is. The room buzzed, tension boiling. Some board members eyed Emily warily now, doubt creeping in. Emily slammed her hand on the table, her composure cracking. Enough, she snapped. This meeting is over. She grabbed the folder and stormed toward the door. But before she could leave, Michael's voice cut through the air. Not so fast. Emily froze, her back rigid. Michael pulled out a sealed envelope from his briefcase and placed it on the table with deliberate force. This, he said, his tone low and powerful, is a subpoena. Federal prosecutors are already reviewing your accounts. Walk out now, and you'll walk straight into their hands. The room went silent. Emily turned slowly, her face pale. For the first time, true fear flickered in her eyes. Not just the fear of exposure, but of losing everything. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but then, her phone buzzed loudly. She snatched it from her purse, glanced at the screen, and her face went white. Without a word, she bolted from the boardroom. I turned to Michael, my chest tight. What was that? Who called her? He frowned, watching the door swing shut behind her. I don't know. But judging by her face, something just went very, very wrong for her. The board members erupted in whispers, some already pulling out their phones. I gripped Michael's arm, my voice shaking. What's happening? And then Michael's phone buzzed. He looked down, read the message, and his eyes widened. He turned to me, his face pale. Maggie. It's worse than we thought. David's back. And he's making his move. When Michael whispered David's name, the blood in my veins turned to ice. David Hayes. The man who once sat at my kitchen table and smiled as if he were family. The man whose slick charm never fooled me, though it had my daughter wrapped around his little finger. The man who, according to Michael's digging, had masterminded the very scheme that sent me to prison. And now he was back. The boardroom felt suddenly smaller, the chatter around me distant, muffled. He can't be back, I whispered, clutching Michael's arm. It's been years. I thought he disappeared after the trial. Michael shook his head grimly. Disappeared, yes, but not gone. He's resurfaced, Maggie. And he's not coming quietly. As if on cue, the door to the boardroom swung open. And there he was. David Hayes walked in like he owned the place. Tall, sharp suit, hair streaked with gray but combed immaculately. His smile was thin, predatory. In his hand, he carried a sleek leather briefcase, and on his arm, Emily. But she wasn't the confident CEO anymore. Her face was pale, her shoulders stiff, her eyes darting nervously as if she were trapped. David's voice boomed across the room. Well, isn't this a family reunion? The board fell silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. I straightened, my heart pounding. David. He smirked at me. Margaret. Out of prison at last, I see. Congratulations. Though I must say, you're looking weathered. The insult rolled off me. After 20 years of his schemes, I was immune to his petty cruelty. Michael stepped forward, his tone sharp. You don't belong here, David. You're not on the board. David chuckled, a sound as smooth as oil. Ah, but you see, I am. As of this morning, I'm the majority shareholder. Thanks to a series of acquisitions. Gasps filled the room. Board members exchanged stunned looks. Emily's lips parted, but she said nothing. Michael's eyes narrowed. Impossible. Those shares were locked under federal review. David tapped his briefcase with a smug grin. Nothing is impossible with the right signatures. Isn't that right, Emily? Emily flinched but forced a nod. I felt my stomach twist. Whatever leverage David had over her, it was strong enough to silence her. David turned his attention to me. His smile widening. You know, Margaret, you really should have sold those shares to Emily when you had the chance. Would have saved us all a lot of trouble. Instead, you held on. And now look where we are. Me at the head of the table. You clawing your way out of a grave you never should have climbed from. I forced myself to meet his eyes. You buried me once, David. But this time, I'm the one holding the shovel. A murmur of approval rippled through the board. For the first time, I saw some of them lean toward me, doubt spreading about the man who had just waltzed in. David's smile faltered for just a second. Then, smoothly, he opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. Unfortunately for you, I've come prepared. These documents prove Emily and I had nothing to do with the scheme 20 years ago. In fact, he spread them across the table like a deck of poisoned cards. They show that Margaret Hayes was orchestrating everything herself, and is still attempting to sabotage her daughter's company today. My chest tightened. More forgeries. More lies. The cycle was repeating itself. Michael snatched up one of the documents, his brow furrowed. These are doctored. I can prove it. David's smile was razor-thin. Perhaps, but proof takes time. And while you waste months in court, the headlines will do the damage for me. He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. You don't have the strength for another trial, Maggie. You won't survive it. And you know it. The words hit me like a slap. My knees trembled, but I locked my jaw. Not again. Not this time. Michael slammed the document back onto the table. If you think intimidation is going to work, you're mistaken. We have sworn testimony. We have bank trails. We have enough to bring you both down. David's smirk didn't waver. Then by all means try. But while you do, Emily and I will keep running this company. And when the smoke clears, it'll be your word against ours. And who do you think the world believes? The billionaire tech icon and her husband, or the frail ex-convict mother with a vendetta? Emily shifted uncomfortably beside him, her eyes darting toward me. For the first time I thought I saw something, regret, maybe even fear, flicker in her gaze. But she said nothing. I wanted to scream at her. Emily, open your eyes. He's using you. He always has. But the words stuck in my throat. David straightened, addressing the board with mock confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you disregard whatever nonsense was presented earlier. This company will continue to thrive under my and Emily's leadership. Any attempt to undermine that will be met with swift legal action." He gathered his papers, slid them neatly back into the briefcase, and snapped it shut. Then he gave me one last, mocking glance. "Pleasure seeing you again, Margaret. I do hope you enjoy your freedom while it lasts." With that, he strode out of the boardroom, Emily trailing behind him like a shadow tethered to a master. The room buzzed with nervous voices, board members arguing in hushed tones. Some looked shaken, others defiant. But all I could hear was the echo of David's words, "Your freedom won't last." I gripped Michael's arm. My voice shook. "He's going to bury me again. I can feel it." Michael's eyes blazed with determination. "Not if we bury him first." And then, just as the tension in the room reached its peak, one of the board members burst back through the door, breathless, holding her phone. "Turn on the news," she gasped. "You need to see this. Right now." The boardroom's tension was already a storm. But when that young board member rushed in, clutching her phone like it was burning her hand, the storm broke into thunder. "Turn on the news," she cried. "It's everywhere." One of the assistants scrambled to switch on the massive flat screen mounted on the wall. The room filled with the flashing red banner of a live broadcast. Breaking news. Federal investigation launched into Hayes tech empire. Froze. My breath caught in my chest. The anchor's voice cut sharp and cold. "This morning, leaked documents suggest widespread fraud, tax evasion, and offshore laundering linked to Hayes Tech, run by Sue Emily Hayes and her husband David Hayes. Federal prosecutors are expected to issue subpoenas within the next 48 hours. The camera shifted to images of reporters swarming outside Emily's headquarters. Headlines scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Hayes Tech stocks plunged 23% in 1 hour. Anonymous whistleblower hands over key evidence. Will the darling of tech face criminal charges? The boardroom erupted into chaos. "What the hell is going on?" shouted one man in a navy suit. "Emily, is this true?" another demanded. "Why weren't we warned?" a woman snapped, her face pale with fury. Emily stood frozen at the head of the table, her face drained of all color. Her hands clutched the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. David wasn't there to shield her this time. He had vanished the moment the cameras turned. Typical. I stared at her, my heart pounding. For the first time, I wasn't the one under the spotlight. She was. Michael leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing is the tip of the iceberg. This company has been rotting from the inside for years. And you've all been misled." Emily snapped out of her stupor, whipping toward him. "Shut up," she hissed. "You think you've won because of some stupid leak? You don't know who you're dealing with." Her voice cracked. The mask of control was slipping. Michael didn't flinch. "No, Emily, you don't know who you're dealing with. The whistleblower isn't some faceless stranger. We know exactly who it is." The room fell silent again. My stomach flipped. I hadn't heard this either. Slowly I turned toward Michael. "Who?" He didn't look at me. His eyes stayed locked on Emily. "The accountant. The same one you bribed 20 years ago." He came forward. He gave prosecutors everything. Names, dates, amounts. All of it. Emily staggered back a step, her face twisting in panic. No, that's not possible. He promised." Her voice broke. The board members murmured again, their whispers sharper now, cutting her down in real time. The woman in the gray blazer spoke, her voice icy. "Emily, if this is true, you're finished. You'll drag us all down with you." Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly. She looked like a cornered animal, darting her eyes toward the door as if she could flee the avalanche crashing around her. I should have felt satisfied, vindicated. After all, this was the moment I dreamed of for 20 years, the moment my daughter faced the truth, the shame, the fall. But standing there, watching her unravel, my heart felt heavy. Because beneath the CEO, beneath the lies, she was still my little girl. And watching her crack open wasn't victory. It was heartbreak. Still I held my ground. I couldn't let pity undo me now. Emily's voice came out in a whisper, trembling. He set me up. David, he promised me it was safe. He said. She stopped herself, biting down on her lip until it bled. Michael seized the opening. So it was David. He pulled the strings. Tell us the truth now, Emily. Before it's too late. For a moment the mask slipped entirely. Emily's eyes glistened with tears, her shoulders trembling. She opened her mouth as if to confess. But then the boardroom doors slammed open. And there he was, David, flanked by 2 towering security guards. His expression calm, almost smug, as if he hadn't just been exposed on national television. Ladies and gentlemen, he said smoothly, strolling into the room like a king reclaiming his throne. Don't believe everything you see on TV. The media loves a good scandal, but the truth is always negotiable. He looked directly at Emily, his smile dangerous. And my dear wife knows better than to forget where her loyalties lie. Emily froze. The color drained from her face completely. And in that instant, I realized something chilling. David wasn't just her partner. He had something on her. Something powerful enough to keep her chained, even now. I took a step forward, my voice sharp. What did you do, David? What do you have over her? He turned to me, his eyes cold. Margaret, you've had your fun. But it ends now. You think you've won because of some whistleblower. You don't even know the half of it. He leaned down, whispering just loud enough for me to hear. Emily isn't your daughter anymore. She's mine. And before I could respond, before the board could react, David snapped his fingers at the guards. Remove them. The guards stepped toward me and Michael. And just like that, the room exploded into chaos once again. The guards moved toward me and Michael like wolves circling prey. Their heavy boots thudded against the polished floor, their broad shoulders blocking out the light from the windows. Don't touch her, Michael barked, stepping in front of me. His voice was steady, but his fists clenched tightly at his sides. David smirked. Always the noble defender, aren't you, Carter? But this isn't your battlefield. This is my company. My rules. And I won't have an old woman and her washed-up lawyer disrupting it. The guards closed in. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear over it. I gripped the table for balance, my old bones trembling, but my spirit refused to bow. I didn't survive 20 years in a cell to be dragged out like garbage now. Before the guards could grab me, one of the board members, an older man with silver hair, rose from his seat. Wait, he said firmly. You can't just throw her out. Not with what we've seen on the news. Not with what she's shown us today. Others nodded, murmuring agreement. The tide of the room was shifting. Doubt had taken root, and David knew it. His smile faltered for a split second before snapping back in place. Board politics are messy. Let me handle this. Security. But then Emily spoke. No. Her voice cracked through the chaos like glass shattering. Every head turned toward her. She was trembling, her face pale, tears brimming in her eyes. Her hands gripped the edge of the table so hard her nails dug into the wood. No, she repeated, her voice breaking. You can't throw her out. You can't silence her again. David's eyes narrowed. Emily. His voice was low, sharp as a blade. Don't. She turned toward him, her lips trembling. I've done everything you asked. I let you run things, I signed what you put in front of me. I testified against my own mother because you told me it was the only way to save us. But this. Her voice faltered, but she pressed on. This has gone too far. Gasps filled the room. Board members leaned in, whispers rising like a tide. David's face darkened. He took a step toward her, his voice low and venomous. Careful, Emily. You remember what happens when you forget who's really in control. Emily froze, her entire body trembling. Her eyes darted toward me, just for a second, And in that glance I saw it. The fear. The guilt. The truth she had buried for 2 decades clawing its way out. I stepped forward, my voice firm. Emily, listen to me. He's using you. He's always used you. He doesn't love you, he doesn't care about you. He only cares about power. Look at what you've become under his hand. Look at what he made you do to your own mother. Her lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. And then, she whispered, barely audible. I know. The room went dead silent. David's face twisted with rage. Enough, he roared. He lunged forward, grabbing Emily by the arm. But before he could pull her away, Michael slammed a hand onto the table. That's assault. And for the record. He pulled a small device from his pocket and held it up. A blinking red light glowed on it. Everything in this room has been recorded. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. David froze, his grip on Emily's arm tightening for a heartbeat before he released her. You son of a... David began, but Michael cut him off. You think you can intimidate us again? Think again. This recording, combined with the whistleblower evidence, is more than enough to bury you both for good. And I guarantee it will be in federal hands before the day is over. David's mask cracked for the first time. His face twisted, his eyes blazing with fury. He slammed his fist onto the table so hard the water glasses rattled. You think this is over? He thundered. You have no idea what I can do. I'll burn this whole place down before I let you take me down. Emily flinched, her tears spilling freely now. David, stop. But he didn't stop. He leaned across the table, his face inches from mine, his voice a low growl. You should have stayed in your cell, old woman. You should have rotted there quietly. Because now... His eyes glinted with menace. Now I'll make sure you don't get a second chance to crawl out of the grave. And then, his phone buzzed loudly on the table. He glanced at the screen. His face drained of color. For the first time since he walked in, David looked rattled. Emily gasped. David, what is it? He didn't answer. His eyes flicked to me, then to Michael, then back to the screen. And in that silence I realized something. Whatever was on that phone. It terrified him. The room held its breath as David stared at his phone. His face pale for the first time. His arrogance slipped like a mask sliding off. Whatever message he'd just received wasn't good. Emily's trembling voice broke the silence. David, what is it? He didn't answer. His jaw tightened. His grip on the phone was so fierce I thought he might crush it. Michael's eyes narrowed. What's wrong, David? Not used to being the one caught off guard. David snapped his head up, glaring daggers at him. Shut your mouth. But his voice lacked the venom it usually carried. I stepped forward, my voice steady despite my racing heart. What's on that phone, David? Another lie unraveling. Another truth you've tried to bury. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly he turned the screen around. And my heart nearly stopped. On the screen was a live broadcast. Federal agents swarming the Hayes estate. Men in suits carried boxes of documents, computers, and hard drives out the front door. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing, the chaos spilling across every news channel in America. The banner at the bottom of the broadcast read, FBI raid on Hayes estate. Major break in corporate fraud case. Gasps filled the boardroom. Phones buzzed as everyone received the same news alert. Michael allowed himself the faintest smile. Looks like your castle is crumbling faster than you thought. David's face twisted with rage. He slammed the phone down on the table. This is temporary. Do you hear me? Temporary. I'll rebuild, I'll sue, I'll. But he was cut off by another sound. A knock at the boardroom door. Firm. Official. Everyone turned as the door opened. 2 federal agents in dark suits stepped inside, badges gleaming. The taller one spoke, his voice calm but commanding. David Hayes. Emily Hayes. You're both under federal investigation. We have warrants for immediate questioning. The room erupted into chaos again. Board members whispered, some quickly gathering their things, others frozen in shock. Emily staggered back, her face white as paper. "No, no, this can't be happening." David sneered. "You can't arrest me in front of my own board." The agent's tone didn't waver. "Sir, you can come quietly or we can make it less pleasant. Your choice." David looked around the room, his gaze sweeping over every face, searching for loyalty. But there was none. Even Emily's eyes avoided his. For the first time, David Hayes looked small. Still, he straightened his suit jacket, forcing a smirk. "Fine. I'll play your game. But don't think this is over. Not by a long shot." As the agents moved toward him, Emily suddenly cried out, "Wait!" All eyes turned to her. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice trembling. "I'll cooperate," she blurted. "I'll tell you everything. Just, please, don't put me in the same cell as him." A shocked silence followed. David whipped around, his face contorted in rage. "You ungrateful little." But before he could finish, the agents restrained him. One turned to Emily. "Anything you say can be used in court. If you're ready to cooperate, we'll take your statement." Emily's lips trembled as she looked at me. For the first time in decades, her mask cracked completely. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Mom, I'm sorry." The words hit me like a knife and a bomb all at once. Too late. Too shallow. But real. I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "You buried me for 20 years, Emily. Sorry won't dig me out." She sobbed, covering her face as the agents gently led her away. David fought against their grip, his voice echoing through the boardroom like thunder. "This isn't the end, Margaret. Do you hear me? I'll take you down with me. If I go to hell, I'll drag you there too." The doors slammed shut behind them. The room was left in stunned silence, the air thick with disbelief. Michael exhaled, his shoulders finally dropping. "It's over," he said quietly. "After all these years, it's finally over." But I wasn't so sure. My chest tightened with a cold dread. Because as David had been dragged out, I'd seen something in his eyes, something that told me he still had one last card to play. And I was right. Because not even 10 minutes later, Michael's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen, his face going pale. "What is it?" asked, my stomach twisting. He looked at me, his voice low, grave. "Maggie." David wasn't bluffing. "There's one more file. A file with your name on it. And if what I'm reading is true, it could destroy you." Michael's face was pale as he stared down at his phone. His hand trembled ever so slightly, and that scared me more than David's threats ever could. "What is it?" I whispered, gripping his arm. He hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. It was an encrypted file, labeled in bold letters. M. Hayes. Confidential. My heart skipped. My initials. Name. Michael's voice was low. David left this as a failsafe. If he was ever cornered, this was his final weapon. And if what's inside is convincing enough, it could frame you all over again. The boardroom, still buzzing from the agent's exit, fell into silence again as Michael connected the file to the large screen. The folder cracked open. Documents filled the screen. Bank transfers, letters, supposed signed agreements. They all painted a horrific picture. Me, secretly siphoning millions during my prison years, laundering money through charities, even funding criminal networks. The room gasped in horror. One board member muttered, "My God, was she behind it all along?" Another whispered, "No wonder she went after Emily." I felt the walls closing in. It was happening again. Another set of lies, so detailed, so carefully constructed, that even I almost believed them. My knees buckled. "No, no, it's not true. It's not true." My voice cracked, shaking the glass walls of the room. Emily's words came back to me, faint as a ghost. "I'm sorry." And suddenly I realized she was the key. "Wait." My voice steadied, firm this time. I turned to the agents who were still nearby, escorting Emily out. Bring her back. Right now. Bring Emily back in here. Minutes later, Emily returned, her wrists bound with soft restraints, her eyes swollen from crying. She avoided my gaze at first, but when she saw the screen, saw the new file with my name plastered across it, her face drained of color. Michael spoke sharply. Emily, you know what this is, don't you? You know who really created it. She hesitated. Her lips trembled. She glanced toward the door where David had been taken. Emily, I said, my voice breaking but strong. I don't have much time left on this earth. You already stole 20 years from me. Don't let him steal the rest. Tell them the truth. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She nodded slowly. This file, she whispered, her voice shaking. It's fake. My husband created it. He kept it as leverage. He told me if I ever betrayed him, he'd release it and bury my mother again. He wanted me trapped. He wanted me scared. And I let him do it. I let him, because I was too weak to fight him. Her voice cracked into a sob. The room erupted in whispers. The agent stepped forward, taking notes immediately. Michael exhaled with relief, his eyes closing for a brief moment. But I just stared at Emily, my heart torn in two. She had finally spoken the truth. But at what cost? I stepped closer to her. She looked at me, her face wet with tears. Mom, she whispered, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please don't let him win. For a long moment I said nothing. The weight of 20 years pressed against me. Then slowly I reached out and touched her hand. I can't erase what you did, I said softly. But I can make sure he never hurts us again. Emily broke into sobs. The agents moved quickly then. With her confession, combined with Michael's recordings and the accountant's testimony, the mountain of evidence against David became unshakable. Within hours, he was charged with racketeering, fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. As the news broke, the stock markets tumbled. Hayes Tech's empire began to collapse. For the first time, David Hayes wasn't the predator. He was prey. I was free. Not just from prison bars, but from the shadow of lies that had hung over me for 2 decades. Standing outside that glass tower, the autumn wind in my hair, I felt lighter than I had in years. Michael stood beside me, steady as ever. Emily was taken away by the agents, facing her own charges, though likely less severe with her cooperation. She looked back at me once, her eyes filled with regret. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. But I prayed, silently, that maybe one day she would find her way back to the little girl who used to chase fireflies. Michael turned to me. It's over, Maggie. You did it. I shook my head gently. No, Michael. We did it. I looked up at the sky, my chest rising with something I hadn't felt in decades. And yet, beneath that peace, there was a lesson carved deep into my bones. People you love most can destroy you, but they can never erase the truth. And sometimes, even the weakest voice can shatter the loudest lies. As cameras swarmed and reporters shouted questions, I walked past them all, my head held high. Because for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't a prisoner. I was Margaret Hayes. And I was finally free. If this story shook you to the core, imagine what happens next when secrets this dark finally reach the light. What would you do if your own child betrayed you this way? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more gripping true-to-life stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe so you never miss the next twist. Your story could be the one we tell next.